The theme for 2023 is Living Out Loud. The theme for March is Cultivating Authenticity. Today's topic, Boundaries Build Bridges. Dr. Ernest Holmes declares, you rob no person when you discover your own good. You limit no person when you express a greater degree of livingness. You hinder no person's evolution when you consciously enter into the kingdom of your good and possess it today. Sociologist Brene Brown declares, when we fail to set boundaries and hold people accountable, we feel used and mistreated. This is why we sometimes attack who they are, which is far more hurtful than addressing a behavior or a choice. This final quote is also from Brene Brown. Compassionate people ask for what they need. They say no when they need to, and when they say yes, they mean it. They're compassionate because their boundaries keep them out of resentment. Let us mindfully affirm together. Sharing my boundaries builds bridges to authentically connect with others. And now I'd like to introduce Reverend Kathleen.
This is a great topic. Love it. It's my growing edge, for sure. Boundaries build bridges. So, to live out loud. That's our theme for the entire year. So to live out loud means to authentically express who we are in truth. Authentically. It's an interesting word. You know, when I looked up the meaning in the dictionary, one of the meanings was to be true to oneself, and also it means of divine origin. You know, so it really is talking about our divinity. When we talk about authenticity, it's our divinity, it's our divine nature, which is what? Love, peace, joy, intelligence, wisdom, and so on. And so this month then is about that. It's about cultivating authenticity. In other words, living out loud as we are called to be, as we're called to show up in this world. And then what that does is as we begin to live authentically, we're able to step into every area of our life and be there in full integrity. And integrity, by the way, is my key word that I'm focusing on. My vision board that I have is related to, yes, what? What's going on? Oh. There was a wasp. Oh. Okay.
It was a very authentic wasp.
It was the authentic, it was the real thing. Okay. My daughter was looking out for me. That was wonderful. Beautiful act of love. And of course, rather than kill it, she takes it outside and living in integrity with her values. So living in integrity with our authentic self, that's what it really is all about. Thank you, Michelle. Oh. Brene Brown has this beautiful definition of authenticity that I'd love to share with you. She says, authenticity is the daily practice of letting go, where we heard that before, letting go of who we think we're supposed to be and embracing who we are. Again, authenticity is letting go of who we think we're supposed to be and embracing who we are. I love that. So while physical boundaries, and we're talking about boundaries today, while physical boundaries can build walls, it can be used that way, we're talking about personal boundaries today and the importance of not only having personal boundaries, but communicating personal boundaries, which we will find out actually builds a bridge for connecting with others. Ultimately, that's the purpose. And I'm reminded of we talked about this several months ago. The idea that boundaries, and you think about a river, the boundaries of the river banks, keep the river on course where it's headed, eventually out to the ocean. And so boundaries also keep us on course of where we're headed. Nancy Levin, in her book, Unsetting Boundaries Will Set You Free, defines boundaries like this: a limit that you set to define what you will or will not do, or what you will or will not accept or tolerate from others. And in our spiritual teachings, the purpose of life is to express itself. And I loved that beautiful quote by Ernest Holmes, because he put it very clearly. Pursuing our good does not really harm or hinder another person ultimately. So pursuing that which we are called to be and to do in this world is something that contributes to the whole. It's not a detriment to another person. So it's really important to get that very clear in our minds as we move forward on our journey, but also keep in mind as we're covering this topic. And as spiritual beings, we of course each have unique ways of expressing our own magnificence on this planet. And we each therefore have personal boundaries that reflect that divine nature. They go hand in hand. So the three things that I'm going to be talking about today are that boundaries actually already exist within us. Communicating boundaries is the next one. And the last one is no is a complete sentence. So our boundaries already exist. As I mentioned before, boundaries are part of our authentic selves, our authentic expression of life. So they already exist. When we live as if we lack boundaries, here's what happens. We unconsciously give others permission to manipulate or take advantage of us. So boundaries, whether they are physical, mental, emotional, help us in alignment, live in alignment with our purpose and our values, and keep us safe and healthy. So a clear way to know that your boundaries exist is that when they are crossed, you feel angry. I learned this very powerfully when I worked with a spiritual coach it was like a full year, I think I worked with her. And that was one of the key things that I had many takeaways from that, but that was one of the key things, is when I noticed myself getting angry, then I asked myself the question, are one of my boundaries being crossed? Something that I value, in other words. And then to take action on it, not just to sit on it and stew on it and continue to be angry, but that is a call to action. Now, I'm not saying that every form of anger is about boundaries, but it's something really to question yourself when you notice some anger arising, to ask yourself, are one of my boundaries being crossed? So our work then is to first identify what we value, and we do that when we're angry about something, and is to get clear about our values and then know that this is where our boundaries exist. And it is not only good and healthy for us to do this, it's really an act of radical self-care. It's assuring that we not only care for ourselves, but ultimately, because we're interconnected with all of life, and doing self-care for ourselves means that we are able to come from what's called the overflow, that we have more to give others when we take good care of ourselves. And a beautiful example that I would like to give of um, standing for your values, standing for one's values, and how that contributes to the greater good are two people in our congregation. And I know many of us hold the value of stewardship for the earth. That's actually one of the values of our community. We have two people, though, in our community who really publicly stand up for sustainability, and that's Monica and Michelle. Yeah, they do. And I'm so grateful for that. And so Monica, who's the leader champion for all the Save a teams, and Michelle's who's one of the Save a team leaders, have worked together to come up with sustainability practices for our spiritual community that I am very proud of. I'm very proud that we live what we teach. And then in addition to that, Michelle has some handouts over on the community table over there that you can take. It's for free. It's just some research that she's done to offer some advanced sustainable or advanced what you call recycling techniques that you can use that you might not even know about if you want to make sure that almost everything that you use finds its place into either recycling or composting or whatever it is. And by the way, we compost here in this community too. And that's one of our newer practices, which is very cool. So that's boundaries already exist. And so again, we know them because we get upset when they're crossed. Communicating boundaries. This is a practice. We talked before about practicing courage and being willing to be vulnerable, to speak up for what we believe in. And that's what is required for communicating boundaries. So years ago, Dan and I went to marriage counseling. And we were really in a lot of conflict at that time. And what we found out very quickly is that we were both expecting the other person to read our minds and know what we wanted, what we didn't want. And so it was causing a lot of conflict. So one of the first things we needed to learn to do is stop thinking the other person is reading our minds and instead communicate our boundaries, our requests out loud. And it made a huge difference in our marriage once we started doing that. A powerful life lesson for me that means that communicating boundaries is essential to the health and well-being of a relationship. And so I have a question for you to consider. Would you stop someone from trying to harm your body or take something that belongs to you? Well, it's the same principle that is around personal boundaries. The importance of stopping someone if they cross your personal boundaries. It's just as essential as the other two things that I just talked about, because it does ultimately cause harm to self and to the relationship. So what else prevents us from communicating our boundaries? Why aren't we always communicating our boundaries all the time? Maybe some of you do. I don't know. But besides expecting people to read our minds and know what we want, there are other reasons. And they're things like maybe we have been brought up to have the value that communicating our boundary is being selfish or difficult or maybe even unspiritual. Anybody brought up with that? You're supposed to obey, and it doesn't matter what the impact is on you, right? So this is going to be really challenging. If we've been raised that way, then it's going to be challenging, and it will take some vulnerability and some courage to begin to start setting boundaries and communicating boundaries. And here's the thing, if we avoid, avoidance is easier. I mean, for those of us who've been trained that way, socialized that way. But the consequences are horrendous. ultimately, in terms of health, well-being, because resentment builds, anger, feeling taken advantage of, feeling abused, feeling manipulated. And so it really takes its toll on our psychology, on our emotionality, on our well-being, on our health. So it's worth it. My point is, for our own well-being and for the well-being of our relationships, it is worth it to step into courage, step into the willingness to be vulnerable, and to speak up for ourselves. And until we communicate our boundaries and hold others accountable, we cannot expect others to honor them. Communicating boundaries is like any other skill. It's challenging at first, but if you practice, 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 it becomes more natural. So again, that stepping into that, through that wall of fear and into a place of courage and vulnerability is essential. No is a complete sentence. This is the final thing. So boundaries, like I mentioned, for rivers, it's riverbanks. Boundaries for our authentic self keeps us on track. And those boundaries can be handled with yeses and nos. And so it helps, therefore, us to live in alignment with our values, live in alignment with our life purpose, and to be and do what we came here to be and do in this world. And knowing our values, as I mentioned before, is very empowering. It empowers us to stay true to our path. So we get to express our values by saying yes to yeses. You know, when we have like a full body yes, have anybody heard of that before? If you have a full body yes, then it's a yes. And if you feel a no, then it's a no. But when we say yes when we mean no to please someone, we are disrespecting our authentic self, and we know what the other consequences are for that. So honoring honest yeses and honest nos is an act of self-love, actually love for others as well, and cultivates authenticity. And I know it's so interesting because when I ask people if they would like to do certain things, I generally say it's okay to say no, because I let them to know it's okay to say no. You don't need to. And I want everybody to hear that it's okay to say no. If I ask you to do something and you're not feeling that yes, it's okay. And it's important to me that we build a community based on radical self-care. And we have several members who are home today because they've communicated with me because radical self-care is being called for them and they need to rest. And so it's important that we honor that. So in closing, I would like to give you a clear method. I love clear methods of setting boundaries because otherwise all of this just becomes a big theory, right? Well, here's a practice that you can use. And Dan put it on, yeah, thank you, Dan. So it's a 5-point boundary declaration. And the key is to do it in as calm and kind and as a firm of a voice as you possibly can. This is not something. If you're still feeling angry, it's a good idea to do a little forgiveness work ahead of time. Pray with a practitioner, whatever, so that you're not coming from anger, but you're coming from love for yourself and love for the relationship. So the first one is to state the value being violated. Example: speaking respectfully is important to me. That's the value. Point out how the value is being violated. Calling me names is disrespectful. State how you feel. I feel hurt, whatever your feeling is. State what you're prepared to do. If I am spoken to disrespectfully again, I will leave. And then the last one is to follow through if your boundary is violated again and leave. Actually follow through. So it is up to us then to teach others how to treat us. This means letting go of expecting others to read our minds. It means getting clear about our values and to remember that anger is a great key or signal to a value being violated, to tune into what that value is. And it's an act of love to declare our values, to set our boundaries, because boundaries build bridges of understanding, mutual respect, and loving relationship. And so let's turn within in prayer, giving thanks for knowing that this time together, this topic, is something that is uplifting to each and every person here, because I'm reminded of who we are and whose we are. That there is one source, one life, one presence, one power that I call God. That presence that is my life and the life of all, that the divine presence lives within us as our very authentic being, our authentic selves. And therefore, I know we are continuously receiving perfect guidance on what is right for us and what is not right for us. And I know that we each are blessed with the courage, the strength, the spiritual power to shift and change any situation that is not supporting our ability to be our authentic selves and to live in full integrity. I know that the right words are come through us and as us, and in each and every moment when it's up to us to stand in our truth. I give my thanks that we are truly divinely guided in each and every moment. I give my thanks that we are here as spiritual community to support each other in saying authentic yeses and authentic nos. And I release this word with a great sense of gratitude for the very presence of the divine in this entire process, guiding and leading us always in the path of greater love, greater joy, greater peace, greater relationship, greater harmony in our lives. And I release this word now to the omni-action of divine law, the law of God, the law of universal mind. I let it be, and I just invite us to accept it with a powerful yes, and so it is. Amen. Thank you.